Okay, we're going to an episode of All on the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really cool review for you from the brand Omega. Originally founded back in 1848, they are Swiss made and part of the Swatch Group's luxury tier. And one thing to note, although they are part of the Swatch Group, they are actually one of the founding members because their original merging with Tissot was actually a precursor to what eventually became known as the Swatch Group. So the history is a touch more pure than some of the other brands within the group that were, you consider rescued by the Swatch Group and kind of revived and kept alive. Whereas, these guys were the ones kind of creating the platform, in the beginning. And it still shows today, obviously, with the level of, internal vertical integration that they have, and of course the range and the prestige that comes around, the Omega brand. Now, in terms of type of watch, you can see that this is a chronograph, some key common characteristics and sign language. When you're looking for a chronograph, you're going to see external pushers to activate timing functions, multiple subdials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales depending on that subgenre. This is the Speedmaster 57, and this is a 41.5 millimeter model inspired by the legendary 1957 original. It features a stainless steel case and a black dial with recessed hour markers showing vintage superluminova beneath. So along with that rhodium plated broad arrow hands, and then the date window at 6 o'clock, a small second subdial at 9, and a 12-hour 60-minute chronograph recorder on the subdial at the 3 o'clock. This has been discontinued and superseded by a downsized manual wine-only model, which goes for 9,500 MSRP. Well, you can get this particular unit for just $6,150 from Belmont Watches here in San Diego. So quite a deal, quite a steal, especially when you consider the fact that you're also getting an automatic. And the size is actually not that much different. When I actually took the calipers to this piece, it's actually only 41 millimeters in diameter and only that 41 and a half at the bezel. So something to consider for those of you that are really concerned about the size. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so really gorgeous piece. I mean, something that Omega really just does well and excels at is their use of photina. I would say they do it best. They find the right tones, and they really are able to just get a balance in terms of the way that the colorways all come together, versus sometimes it can seem a little bit too forced, a little bit too yellow, too green. I don't know. There's something about the way that they do their old radium lume that I have to say comes off as being quite attractive, right? And the nice thing is it does suit the overall aesthetic here because you are getting an older school style of case. Very, very classic bevels down those, beautiful wide lugs there. And when we get into some more of the dimensions here, the height is 16.2 millimeters, which might seem quite thick, but honestly, I will say for an automatic chronograph, not too shabby at all. And it does a good job of actually breaking down the visual weight by having that thinner mid case, and then of course very clear protrusions, whether it be on the upper side or the case back side there. So I think it really helps things stay quite linear and broken up. And then you can also see really the quality of the brushing here. If I can get the light to hit it just right, you can see that very, very fine hairline brushing definitely is at an absolute luxury level. It's not the same standard as a satin brush you're going to find, at lower levels within the, I'm just going to give it a quick wipe here. Within the Swatch Group, you're not going to see this level of brushing on a Certina, a Tissot, or a Mito. So as nice as those watches can be, there's definitely very clear lines that they keep within, their different offerings to keep things quite separated so they're not competing against each other. This is definitely meant to be with more within that luxury realm. And this timepiece, I would say, is a little bit, within that space as well, because they do go they go the extra mile in terms of a lot of these details. Although this is a tool watch at heart, it does have a lot of specific characteristics that to me are definitely quite luxurious, just because they go above and beyond really what they need to do. Again, beyond just a premium and a functional level, they do definitely add a lot of those extras that you would expect from something within this price point. Now, the crystal is a beautiful double dome box sapphire with anti-reflective coating on both sides, and you can see it is insanely legible even at very harsh angles. There you can see that hand stack really quite beautifully. Another detail here is that the bezel is all steel, and you can see once I get the light right on it, you can see it is etched there with that tachymeter scale, which looks very, very nice, very timeless, and something that helps to stand out from your typical Speedmaster professional moon watch, just because it really adds that, and of course the addition of the broad arrow hand definitely gives it more of a specific feel to the space race and everything like that. It doesn't feel as much like a motorsports, watch that's been repurposed. Let's get the action here. We'll just get some visual interest going, but let's test the, really great tactile engagement in terms of those pushers. Nicely signed crown there, and this movement is pretty wild. It's not decorated the same way you would see, let's say, something on the more kind of hot horology side of luxury. It definitely has its own look, but in terms of the engineering prowess, the capabilities, the tolerances, this is a very, very finely finished movement. Some may not like the way that looks. I think the manual line movement, of course, is going to be much more handsome, but this is going to be a lot more advanced in terms of its capabilities and its performance. Now, flipping back over to the other side here. Oh, one thing to mention, the crown is push-pull. Of course, it's not screw down. I don't think anybody would expect it to be, but I do want to make sure to note that. Now, in terms of the movement performance, this is the Omega automatic coaxial caliber 9300, which is a chronometer. So, it means that it has that, great spec in terms of, I believe it's, was it -3 +4 seconds a day? Correct me if I'm wrong, but again, this is not a master chronometer, regular chronometer grade. 60-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate, which you don't always find in Omega. Typically, they slow the beat rate down to extend the power reserve. Here, you're still going to get an extended power reserve at 60 hours, but still having that nice higher beat rate in terms of the sweep on that seconds hand. So, getting into the dial here, guys, a lot of people might see that this is a sandwich dial. It is just sandwich like. They do say that this does have recessed hour markers, so they're not necessarily cut out the same way you would think of a sandwich dial, so I'm going to believe them when they say that. Also, old radium superluminova, great formula that Omega uses, very warm, and again feels quite natural. And even the matte on the black, they just dial all those items in and balance them in a really, really clean and classic way. You are getting 100 meters of water resistance, which is very nice. And, of course, with that, you want to make sure that the crown is engaged, pushed all the way in, and you don't have any pushers running while you do have the watch submerged, and you'll be just fine. In terms of the lug width, 20 millimeter lugs. And did I mention that the lug width on here, lug to lug, is 50 millimeters? So not the shortest, not the longest, definitely on the longer side, which is maybe why they downsized a bit, but still very, very nice. And then that 20 millimeter lug width makes it quite versatile in terms of swapping and switching things things up. But it does have solid links and end links with a mild 2mm taper down to 18mm at this nice deployant clasp here, which is kind of a two-phase. It's not like a normal butterfly. Basically, you get this, and then you have the over clasp there. So very nice, very, very clean. And then of course there are little half links there so you can dial in the fitment to your liking. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears actually quite well, but if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, there's going to be a bit of perspective distortion where it's going to appear much larger. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so you guys can still get a detailed look while just having a bit of a truer aspect ratio. I will note that I do not have enough links. I think I'm just like a half link away, or maybe even swapping out one of the half links for a full size link to getting a perfect fit, but I do have a larger wrist at 7.5 inches. But I do believe there's an extra link, or two over in the box somewhere, but I'm not going to mess with that. So I think it looks really great. Of course, a little bit tighter on my wrist just for this wrist shot, but I did want to show you guys how well it wore, because some of you were thinking it was 16mm. Wow, but you look at that, and I gotta say that wears extremely well. That mid case still visually appears quite thin. Those lugs sweep down really quite beautifully. And of course, that beautiful box domed sapphire is very clearly adding some height, and it's not like one big bubble on your wrist. So it's really nice to see each kind of piece of thickness there mitigated and compartmentalized really well in terms of the design layout. So with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, really strong Lume, well applied, beautifully done, and you're still getting those great cardinal references because of that signature double pip on either side of the 12. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe include some harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of production defects. Here you're just going to see a bit of wear and tear from some light wear, because this is, of course, a pre-owned piece. But most of it, I will say, is just probably smudging from the, on those high polished features there from just, hey, it's a warm summer day in Oceanside when I'm filming this. But you can see there, guys, the level of uniformity of the light as it glides over those satin brushed finishes look beautiful. Also, you're going to notice really how legible this is, even transitionally, whether you are depending on just the Lume or you do have a bit of a glimmer there of all of the rest of the scales on that dial. So very, very nice, guys. Closing thoughts on the wrist. Definitely, interesting, right, in terms of the sizing. So it's not that large when you think about it, right? 41.5 for a chronograph, 16.2mm for an automatic chronograph. That's actually not that big, but the longer upper lug flats do make the watch appear a little bit larger. But overall, again, when you take the rest into context, that this is an automatic chronograph, it's physically very manageable in terms of size, right? Like the numbers are fine. It's only a 50mm lug to lug. If it was like 52, 53, hey, be careful. But at 50, I think that's most folks' limits. So I think it should really work from that perspective as well. In terms of model variants, of course, this is discontinued, but slightly smaller hand-wound only variations are now available on bracelet or straps, with various style color combinations. But in terms of comparables, there's endless vintage or micro brand references if you want to achieve kind of this same aesthetic, but not many mainstream luxury options that really play within the same space, apart from maybe Zenith, I would say, with their excellent heritage reissues. But apart from them, you know, there's really not too much that's within the same space. So for me, guys, bottom line, if you want a Speedy that stands out in a sea of professional moon watches, but doesn't feel silly, gimmicky, or you know, different just for the sake of it, I think the 57 line just might be kind of many people's sweet spot. To I think to include my own, yeah, I think if I was gonna have one Speedy, it would probably be the professional Moonwatch Sapphire Sandwich is the way I would think I would go. But man, this thing is a charmer, I have to say, and of course, the aesthetic equally iconic, but at the same time a lot more fresh, and you know, not something that you see every day, which I think is great, or maybe not even every Tuesday. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.